very warm welcome to the second session of panel discussion on exploring new face-to-face teaching paradigms, conflating physical and digital. Discussion today will be hosted by Professor Sandeep Roy, and panelists who are joined with the discussion today are Professor Suryanarayan Dulla, Professor Madhu Vinjamur, Professor Prakash Nath Gopalan, Professor Virendra Singh, and Professor Krishnendu Sinha. The first session of this panel discussion was very exciting, and I'm looking forward to listening to panelist views today. With this brief introduction, I would like to hand over to the session to Professor Roy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Patwardhan. So, on behalf of the Office of CCNT and Professor Patwardhan and his team, I would like to welcome all of you again to the second edition of this panel discussion. The theme being exploring new face-to-face teaching paradigms and the way to blend or conflate the physical and the digital. So last Wednesday, we had hosted 5 of our colleagues, and today we have with us 5 more colleagues who are also recipients of the Professor Sukhatme Award for Excellence in Teaching. Just to recall, in the last panel discussion, we had the opportunity to acquaint ourselves with all the individual approaches that have been innovated and adopted by some of our colleagues and the dividends that they have paid. So we noticed that the methods that had been applied have been very thoughtful, quite variegated, and with diverse degree of success. And I'm sure the audience who had participated also had the opportunity to gain insights into the potentialities of digital mode of teaching. So I must say that listening to our colleagues often is a fairly liberating experience to gain such vistas of new thinking, new experimentation. And it is not difficult to guess or sense that such efforts and achievements are ultimately grounded on a commitment to, and of course, a love for the academic calling. And I may dare say that the academia may be the last bastion of idealism in a world which seems increasingly destined towards an uncertain future. But as it is said, hope is an everlasting fancy of the human heart. So I'm no exception to the belief that when the world probably steers away and turns towards a more positive future, maybe the academia would be at the vanguard of such a revival. I think its openness and its essentially inventive spirit will probably come to the rescue. At least I hope so. Now, to return to our theme, the exclusively digital mode of teaching surely has its advantages, and these have been explored by many of us. And we have, as I said last time, we have mostly warmed to this mode of teaching. But I think if it is spliced with the old world face-to-face teaching, the advantages of the digital mode may be brought into sharper relief. Maybe the future of teaching lies in hybridizing these two modes. It may help make the face-to-face teaching more penetrative, while hopefully it will also render the digital mode more humanized. So in the last week's occasion, we had the opportunity to listen to our colleagues and their thoughts. We expect the similar kind of thoughts, of course, individuated, on what possibly could be the repercussions of hybridizing the two modes on teaching, research, and possibly our role as academic. So as Professor Patwardhan has already welcomed all the speakers today, we had Professor Suryanarayan Dulla, Professor Madhu Vinjamur, Prakash Nath Gopalan, Professor Virendra Singh, and Professor Krishnendu Sinha. For want of anything better, I will invite the speakers in the same order. And as during the last session, we would like to reserve all the discussions after all the speakers have expressed their views and and they have been summarized. So I request all of you to please mute yourself till that time. So with this, I would hand over the mic to Professor Suryanarayan Dulla to keep his views. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Roy, for giving me these opportunities to speak about what are our actually plans when we actually go back to the so-called new normal mode. I think I'm definitely like any other colleague in the institute. I'm definitely looking forward to actually do an in-person classroom. That's the first thing. And the advantages what online system has actually brought in is in terms of submission of the assignments, quizzes, and other things that I would still try to keep it online. I will still keep all the evaluations online. I mean, let me also tell how I actually do evaluation. Maybe that will give some idea. So student, when I say online, the exam is actually more or less offline because they have to do pen and paper business. They scan and they upload the documents. I would still stick to that approach because that actually gives students more flexibility and time to upload at their convenience before the deadline. So I would continue that approach. When it comes to teaching, I have been teaching using the tablets for more than 5 years now. So that way, I think it was not really new to me to teach, except the most important factor that I actually missed is actually interaction with students. I badly missed that because when we teach in a regular classroom, whether you teach on a tablet or use chalk and board approach, you get to know whether students have understood or not because you have an eye-to-eye contact with them. That is absolutely missing. Even if you actually ask all the students to turn on their videos, it doesn't really help because they may be looking at the camera, not at you. So that's definitely not an eye-to-eye contact. Like, for example, right now I'm actually looking at the screen, so people may not be even looking at my eyes because that's a big problem in online system. I think once we actually enter into the class, it's going to be completely different. So I'm going to stick to my previous approach of teaching in the classroom, where I actually give some questions, ask student to solve. Most of the time, I expect students to solve on the board or on the tablet which I have, so that they're generally prepared. So because they really don't know who I'm going to ask. So in almost all the classes, 1 or 2 students will be end up solving problems in the class. So that helps them because they come prepared to the class. Otherwise, they just walk into the class without even preparing. So this is what actually helped me all these years as well as the student. And this is what at least I believe from the feedback what I got outside the feedback forms actually from the student. They generally don't write in the anything like this in the feedback form, but when you actually ask them, they tell that asking them questions in the class is quite helpful, which I'm still doing in the online. I just call their names, and most of the time I even there were instances where I tell CR, can you just check whether that guy is actually online? So the CR calls and says that he's actually asking you a question. This actually kills a little bit of time in the class, but I think it's actually worth doing exercise. Often what I have actually realized is most of us feel that we have more time in online teaching, so we try to teach more. This is what actually I have noticed in the previous panel discussion also, but I'm a bit concerned on that because if everybody thinks they actually have more time, and if everybody teaches more material than what we are supposed to teach, students have limited time to actually absorb it. So hence I decided that I'll actually stick to what I used to do when I was doing an offline classroom. So I did not take more number of hours than what was stipulated for a particular course. Okay, and I'm generally available on chat, so they can always post a question within few minutes or hours. I generally respond to those questions. I would still stick to the chat business when it goes offline, because it is quite helpful. Students don't have to come back and don't have to actually come and meet me. They usually scan the documents, put it, I download, correct it, and I actually put it back. So most of the queries were answered either instantaneously or with some time difference depending upon my availability at that time. But that is quite helpful. So they don't have to take my appointment to come to the class. That is something I would still like to continue when we actually go back to the classroom approach. And quizzes and all, as I mentioned, I will just stick to the previous approach, but all uploads will actually be online. I'm not going to take a piece of paper from them. So I'll correct everything and I'll upload them back on the online system so that they can check. And then if they have any clips, they'll post it there, I'll respond. I think that is quite helpful. It saved a lot of time, at least for me, and I'm quite sure for students also. And going forward, if I follow that approach, I'm quite confident that it saves a lot of time. So there, as I mentioned before, I will be there is no fixed time for them to come and meet me. They can post any time and I'll actually respond to their queries, definitely before the next class. Otherwise, they can always ask me in the class. And another thing what I miss in the online class is, of course, I have figured out a way to address that issue. Usually when the class is over, we used to stand outside and discuss, especially if it is a 11:30 to 12:30 class. half an hour, 45 minutes discussion. That is somehow missing in the online system. So I actually requested our timetable coordinator got a slot 6 slot so that I can actually have this half an hour discussion after the class. It's not compulsory. I generally don't teach anything new in that slot. So it's only discussion of what we discussed so far in the semester. They can pick any topic and actually ask a question. I'll try to address that. That is quite helpful because students generally don't catch up immediately. So I would keep that additional slots, maybe sometime, maybe half an hour, 2 half-an-hour slots for them to ask questions to me in addition to the chat window. This is something I would like to take from the online system and continue when I'm doing offline. I think maybe I'll stop here so that we can go to the next speaker. Thank you, Professor Rai.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dulla. I think you have highlighted an important point which all of us would very readily appreciate, is that the seeming passivity of students when you go online, and the fact that the interaction 1:1, which is essentially what we are looking at, face-to-face interaction, the kind of learning potential and the pedagogic impact that it has is quite substantial. So that I think is going to remain and for good. And I think that is something that we need to look for opportunities to integrate with digital mode of teaching. I think you have highlighted this point very well, and I'm sure all of us would really appreciate that particular aspect, and all of us probably have the same experience about it. Thank you, and we will come back to the discussion phase. Now I would invite Professor Madhu Venjamur to express his thoughts on the subject of the panel discussion.
Thank you, Professor Roy. I hope I am audible to all of you.
Yeah, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So we tell our kids stories. One of the title of the stories is "Whatever happens, happens for our good." So maybe the pandemic happened for our good. I mean, nothing to take away from all those people who were adversely affected. Actually, I also got affected by COVID. So not only I got COVID, but my relatives also got. So I understand the difficulties, but said in a lighter way. So why I say that whatever happens, happens to our good is applicable to here is I think across all departments, all courses, now we have a very rich repository of this recorded lectures, pre-recorded lectures with the course contents. In my opinion, we can utilize this material in a very effective way when classes will begin offline. I will tell you what I think is an ideal situation, but I have my apprehensions. I'll talk about those also. So the ideal situation is that I would still give these pre-recorded lectures a week before to the students, and I will ask them to, probably I'll divide the class into 3 groups, and I'll meet each group maybe once every week. And the idea during that week is only to clarify the questions they have on the material that they would have studied the week before. So this is like a flipped classroom, which I think in our institute also several faculty tried. I remember attending Professor Kameshwari, Computer Science and Engineering. I think she did try before, but now many of our faculty can try this. So I see many advantages of this, that students would have gone through the lectures. So an ideal situation is where students come prepared to the class. And when I say come prepared to the class, I mean they jot down the questions they have, the difficulties, the sticky points, or something they need to discuss. And the classroom time would be just focused on that. I'm not going to spend time on, let us say, long derivations. All that would be there either as in the form of notes or in the pre-recorded lectures or some curated material. So I'm not going to spend time on this, but spend more time on discussing their difficulties. And over a period of time, I think it is my experience, I'm pretty sure it is the experience for all of us, that I think engineering education is hard. It is, and basic sciences, basic sciences or engineering, or for that matter, education itself is hard. It's a slow process, it takes time to digest. So this way of doing flipped classrooms, in my opinion, is going to help the students understand the material better, rather than the teacher going over all the uh, uh, topics in a very systematic way. I mean, that also helps. That is also fine. And research actually shows that when it comes to learning part of it, if it is gauged, let us say, in the form of marks that students secure at the end of a semester, there is not much difference between these flipped classroom type or the systematic way of doing. But research also indicates that when it comes to retaining knowledge, when it comes to using what has been learned, retention is more when students are engaged in this way. One form of that engagement is the flipped classroom. So I would do that, and I think if we divide the class, currently I have a class, let us say 75 students, I can divide this into 3, so 25, and with 25 students, I think I can devote more time to, I can give more time to each one of them. But of course, I'm going to meet them probably once a week, not thrice a week. And I expect them to go over the lectures and then come discuss these sticky points within them. So this is how I think these notes, these last 2 semesters of experience will help. And frankly speaking, at the beginning of the of 2020, I was very nervous. I actually did not know how to do all this. I'm sure many of us are in the same boat. But now I feel better. I feel more comfortable during doing this online education. We have figured out various things, and we can carry it forward. But when it comes to exams, I think students have to come and take exams physically. There is no way out of it. Seen in our system, experience of our department.
Professor Madhu, can you please closer to the mic? Can you speak closer to the mic? There is some fluctuation.
For exams, I wouldn't do any exams online. If the students have come back and we are doing this, I wouldn't do any exams online. I would do all exams offline. So these are some of my thoughts on how we can conduct maybe a hybrid class going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Vinjapur. I think you have brought out an aspect of this possible combination of hybridized education, which most of us will agree to, is that when you want to join the two or blend the two, it would become functional and effective if there is cooperation between the teacher and the taught. So as you said that one of the advantages that this digital mode has conquered upon us is that build up of a rich repository of information and knowledge, which is there to be taken up by students. So the actual classroom contact would be better used in discussing, in spreading or expanding the horizons in some sense. But it is important that the students cooperate in this whole process. Normally we accuse the students, or a large fraction of them, for kind of passivity. But maybe the new mode will excite them and perhaps it will change. So let's hope so. And on a lighter note, I would go back to your adage that whatever happens, happens for good. So far in my life, many adverse things have happened. And I've always had my wife or mother rationalize with the same words. Whatever happens, happens for good. So I'm still waiting for that good to happen. But I hope that is not true for a digital mode of education or the hybrid. Thank you. I think we will come back to you during the discussion phase. So we will move on to our next.
Just a 1 minute. I'm sorry for interrupting you. That was my apprehension too. I think when we go to this hybrid mode, whatever I said, I think the responsibility lies more with the students. Now, whether all the students of the class are up to it, I am not sure. And I think they are not. In my opinion, probably 50% of the class is not. So that is my apprehension. Whatever I said is an ideal situation. Actually, work or not is for us to maybe do an experiment and see the results. Thank you.
But no harm in thinking about the ideal, because the practical will come out of it anyway. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
So we can move on to our next speaker, Professor Prakash Nantagopal.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity, Professor Patpat and Professor Roy and the organizing team. Is my voice audible, Professor? Loud and clear?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, let me share my online teaching experience first, and then I will move on to talk about the blending of classroom teaching with online. So when we started in 2020 April, since then it is 4 semesters. I have taken classes for PG, UG, strengths varying from 20 to 120. Since my course content is in PPT, I did not face much of a problem in terms of transition between classroom to online. So it was really a smooth transition for me. A bit of experimental things were done in terms of uploading the recorded videos and then taking live lectures. Everything I have experimented in the April to May 2020, that particular semester itself. And I found that uploading the PPT upfront, which is mostly self-explanatory in my courses, well in advance, and live lectures and posting the live the recordings seems to be the best option, which is working so far for the online-based courses. The only difficulty similar to other process commented also that we couldn't read the students. Since many a times because of internet connectivity, they will not be able to switch on, and genuinely or they may have their own reasons for that. So couldn't read them. So understanding their level of content in their course learning becomes a little difficult job. But however, looking at the assessments seems to be effective in my opinion, and the average scores when compared with the previous year's same subject seems to be better during online. Maybe because that they are able to see the recordings multiple times, possibly because during class times, although they ask doubts, they can't go back. So during the recordings, they can go back and then revisit and then learn the fundamentals better. So as a teacher, like the things which I learned is I can talk to a monitor without having anyone around. So that kind of capability has come now. The second thing is, although we get feedback from students, colleagues, and other people also about our teaching, self-assessment, I believe, is the best, one of the best assessments. So looking at the recordings, once again, that gives a kind of lot of learning for me. So when I go back and see the recordings, I learn my mistakes and I could able to correct many things, right? From pronunciation, speed, flow, content. So it gives me a kind of refinement of my own teaching, which I possibly may not have obtained during my classroom interaction. So this is one of the best things that I have learned through this online. Now, talking about the blending, what the way forward, like how we are going to move forward. So I plan to have some kind of periodic and quick assessments through mobile, because now both students and faculty members are able to manage the digital system better. So like a 5-minute quiz kind of thing using their mobile, because everyone has a kind of smartphone nowadays. So looking at the possibility, not for grading, not for using these values or marks for grading purposes, but for assessing the student understanding. So I'm planning to do that, possibly if everything works out, even for large classrooms. This is possible even if they are not attending the classes or if they are not coming to the classes, like a 5-minute mini quiz kind of thing, just for assessing their understanding level, not for grading purposes. Second, I'm planning to have some kind of group discussions. Generally, group discussions are very common. This is not something new, but for classes like 120, even if you split like 10 to 12 groups, having them sit in a room and discuss about a particular content becomes a little difficult, and identifying time and other limitations are there, and the room and other things, facilities. But now during weekends or weekdays, we can have this separate chat rooms or meeting rooms in the same login, and then they can come up with a kind of proper discussion and debate can happen. So on specific topics, this possibly can help both the faculty member and the students to understand the subject better. So possibly this may help. So these are some of the plans. And even if a student misses the classroom due to some medical reasons, Definitely, he will not be missing the content because recordings are there. This we will be sharing with all the students. And so these are the things which I have in mind at this point of time. And the only challenge that I see in terms of this hybrid mode is basically or the transition from online of 4 semesters, possibly next semester may also be, I do not know, they are saying hybrid. So we do not know. Looking at this one, the lot of inertia is there from the student side to convert back to or resume the classroom activity. So we have to do something so that the students come with the same enthusiasm like what they were earlier. So these are some of my points and submissions for discussion. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Nathagopalan. I think you have also highlighted some key issues which I think all of us have faced to a varying degree. For one, the impersonal nature of talking and teaching via a monitor, which is not a kind of a sentient kind of a device that way. And of course, another important point that is of interest is that the idea of self-assessment by teachers, that online mode of teaching and the repository that is built up can actually help teachers improve their own teaching style. In fact, the current understanding in the industry is, as far as safety is concerned, that organizations need to self-regulate themselves instead of waiting for an external regulator. So I see a parallel here that you have drawn, that we need to quote unquote regulate ourselves rather than wait for students to actually assess us and have it available on AAC to figure out how well we have taught. We could do that in a more dynamic way, which is a good learning, I think. And of course, as I would also probably agree with you that there could be some kind of inertia to going back to classroom teaching. I personally have become used to working from home. And in fact, there is a growing kind of sort of a feeling, even in the industry, that in a recent survey that was done in many industry through HR departments, that many employees now would like to have the flexibility of actually working from home rather than going back to physical working space, especially people who have to take care of many other things at home as well. So anyway, we'll see how it works out. But to borrow what Professor Vinchamuru had said, whatever will happen for the good. So let's hope so. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll move on to Professor Virendra Singh next.
Thanks for inviting me. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Am I?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So thanks, Professor Roy, putting these things in perspective. So the topic is that how we can take away some learning from our online teaching to the real in-person teaching. And of course, many of the problems other colleagues have already mentioned, and of course, I'm also facing the similar kind of challenges. So many of us are facing or very similar kind of challenges. If I look at this online teaching business, perhaps in last a decade or so, two things have hit us in good way or bad way. One is the Google, that everywhere you have Google, and then Google, maybe the moment you say something, students will start to look at whether I'm saying correct or not, particularly if you want to relate the history of technology with the chronology of history. Perhaps maybe you may say that it was in 1963. They will say, oh sir, this was 1957. So always the Google is one wherein you have information available in bits and pieces, which is not very structured, and therefore many times they may not be able to relate that the context, and they can come up with some information which perhaps is not completely correct. So if they have these all online resources, one challenge already we are facing because of Google. Some students are getting benefit of that because they have quick availability of information, but sometimes if they are not really thorough, they may carried away with some information which is partially correct. The another one is the COVID, which has hit us badly, and because of that we resorted to go to online mode. If I look at this online mode, of course the online mode is also not very new to us. I remember before I coming to IIT Bombay, I was with IIT Bangalore, and around that time new IITs came up, and then I used to teach couple of newer institutions around that time in online mode. Of course, the difference was that there was a one-to-one link, and students were gathered in a classroom. Only instructor was online from the other place. And still you can see that in that online mode, the students had the same tendency as sitting on the back benches. I used to tell them that now it is camera who is looking at you, so you need not to look sit at the back bench. Wherever you sit, my camera can be focused on you. So so that was the time when we had a variant of online teaching already started. And when I came here, I recorded my lectures in 2012 or 13, and I was told that those lectures were also broadcasted from CDP studio to the campus. So a couple of students even attended those lectures from the hostel. It was good repository. I mean, most of the students used to come to class. Some students attended from hostel, and they had a repository. One degeneration of that had happened in the following way, that they thought if I miss something, then they think that, oh yeah, the online recording is there, I can watch at any point in time. But unfortunately, that any point in time doesn't come before a night for the exam, and all of a sudden you have 42 hours lectures, and then it's very difficult to manage. Then they try to do all possible way, like running at 2x speed or 4x speed, but still it's very difficult to catch these things in a right way. So all those students who were able to manage their time, they were able to benefit from that because they watched those lectures well in time, so that here they can learn the next lecture pretty well, and so on and so forth. However, some people, some students who were not that systematic in that case, they ended up having like say watching all those videos on the 11th hour, and then almost like getting very little from that. So these were some of the learnings we had from the past. Now only the difference that has happened is we have one-to-one link from I mean, everybody is a independent entity in this, and can have one-to-one link rather than some people sitting at one place. So then interaction, of course, the one of the fun of teaching is the interaction between a student and a teacher, and that has reduced to the minimal level. So we have to somehow enhance. All of us tried by different ways to say enhance the interaction, but still it is very challenging. And many times we think that many students do have challenge in terms of connectivity, and so maybe ask some question by name sometimes, but here mostly reframe that that may hurt some people whom I am calling again and again, and he is not able to answer because he or she doesn't have good connectivity. So those are challenges that we faced. Of course, we have already produced good repository of the lectures that can be used even in my online, I mean offline classes. Whatever lectures I recorded in 2012 or 13, I used to give the CD link in the very first class. In all classes, I used to put my all the PPTs in the very first class, and say that I would be by and large following the same, but the class discussion is different, and every year that's why the course is different every year. Otherwise there is no fun. It becomes like a more streamlined, that whatever is bullet point I have written on the slide, I keep on going through that. Even if I little bit deviate again, I'll come back to the same thing, and it would be more structured but more boring kind of teaching. So carrying class would be more interesting when we carry students all along with us, and that's how the teaching is steered with the students interaction. So enhancing the students interaction with all these online resources which they can make use, perhaps is one of the things that one we have to look at. uh, who are say, even in online classes, maybe many people think that they are covering more than whatever they cover in the offline class or in-person class. Unfortunately, I am able to cover about 70-75% of my offline classes. In offline class, you can quickly sense how students are learning, and then the class is molded along with that. Otherwise, you have to be a little bit more rigorous and do a little bit more examples. Sometimes you don't get the sense whether students are really catching up that. Sometimes those things we think that they are a little bit difficult in understanding. Perhaps students may not feel that those are difficult. So that you can sense quickly in the class, and then you can go ahead. So that is the on coverage. I have a little bit different view. Of course, like here, when we all of us are in the online, we already students are already using these mobile, etc. So giving some quick quizzes, particularly in the large class. Of course, in small classes we can always have more involved interaction, but in large classes, taking 5 minutes quiz in between perhaps can give break in the monotonicity of the teaching, as well as it will give more sense that how much they are able to observe from this. So in my view, these are some of the things which we can carry forward and make our teaching more interesting when it comes to the offline classes. Of course, the professors always have these challenges. Perhaps I think the first challenge came when the on books started to be published. Still, we cope up with that. Now we have all video repositories available from all over. Then still we have to cope up, and I believe that good days will again come back, and we'll enjoy the similar kind of project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Singh. I think you have brought out an important aspect of a challenge that may actually make us sort of encounter in the hybrid form. One aspect is, of course, everybody appreciates that there is a built-up of good repository, but there is an intrinsic danger of that falling into a kind of a static form of knowledge. The fact that you mentioned that every year the course may be taught differently, and indeed that is the experience for most of us. We teach the same course, given at a certain tag, but every year it is a different course, because the delivery, because of the immediacy, everything changes, and it is not really one course of a year cannot really be mapped on to another course in a different year. So that is an important aspect. I think how you avoid the danger of making so-called repository, which in itself has advantages, but how to make it sort of still interesting, attractive for the students to engage with. So I think there probably the hybrid form of teaching in the form of face-to-face teaching will have to come in, and how you blend the two, which probably make a difference, I presume. So it's like anything, most things in life, it is a double-edged sword. Some things are advantages and some things are not. So we probably have to subdue the disadvantages part of it and extract the advantages part of it. Yes. So that's an important point. I think going forward, that would be an important challenge for most of us to address. It is not enough to generate the repository, but to keep it live, keep it engaging for the students. So thank you. I think we will revert you again during the discussion time. So I would now invite Professor Krishnendu Sinha, who's the last speaker in our panel.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to the organizers to have us here and to share our thought and hear to our colleagues about online teaching and, of course, the hybrid mode. Most of the points have already been covered, and I think it'll be. I will keep my part short and only to the things which are not yet touched upon. We are talking about the challenges of online teaching, hybrid teaching, and all of us have somehow adapted to this setup over the last 1.5, almost 2 years, 4 semesters. But I think there's also another aspect to it, which is the challenges that the students face. And I think maybe we are also already talking about those in a different forum, but I think that is probably a bigger challenge for them to connect to the class, connect to the instructor over a laptop screen or sometimes even a smaller device. I think, as somebody pointed out rightly, that only the most motivated students are able to cope up with the digital mode of teaching. By cope up, I mean doing, let's say they do as well as they're doing in their in physical mode. Many students are lagging behind. So I think that is a challenge which all of us probably have to come face to face at some point. That said, there is the positive side of this current setup, is it has opened up huge opportunities. It has gotten all of us into the digital mode. It was there earlier. We have all recorded our lectures for CD, but really the actual thing happened when the pandemic forced us to do this. And I think teaching is one aspect of it. Delivery is one aspect of the digital mode. The other aspect is definitely that contact with student, which we are sorely missing. And there's no replacement for it. I think can not really substitute eye contact in the digital mode, whatever way we try. And the third aspect is evaluation. So evaluation has actually been a huge challenge. Evaluation in the form of how the procedure of evaluation, and also to keep it fair for students, because as instructors or as teachers, it's our responsibility to be fair to the students who are putting in the hard work, and so that their work is paid off. So in that context, I think I want to share one small experience or one thing that I've tried, which may be useful to others, is to have project-based evaluation, even for classes which are not too small. And for example, when I taught the course to a second year batch of aerospace engineering, there were about 80 students. They were given group projects of some. There were regular exams, there were regular evaluation, but one part of the one component of the evaluation was project based, and there I kind of compared the time commitment that it takes from the instructor side, because that is always a concern that, evaluating each project presentation, question, answer will add up to a huge amount of time. It turns out it's not entirely true, especially if in the digital mode. If I am conducting an exam for which I have to set up a question paper, put it in the digital mode, and then maybe have some variations of it, variants of the question, so that different students get different variants. The way to set up that they can input those maybe numerical answers, so that they can be automatically checked by a system like Moodle. So a TA doesn't have to check 10 variants of a question. He will check. Moodle or some automated computer will do part of the job. Then keeping track of online proctoring, recordings of their screen, which are being uploaded, and all the difficulties there are in uploading and downloading and everything. So I think if you add all of that, and finally, making question paper, finally getting to the evaluation, the amount of time I computed for a midsem sort of evaluation, it came out to be comparable to group presentations followed by one-to-one question answer. This is something which I think was an eye-opener for me, and I think it worked very well. And I could distinguish on a face-to-face, at least one person on the screen, face-to-face with video and audio on. It was close to a physical face-to-face interaction, and you can see how you can pretty much judge from the person's mannerism how much he knows, how much he has learned in the viva. So I think that is one aspect of it. Evaluation will always be there because we are not going back from digital in any way. We probably are going to go more into digital, even though hybrid is going to be there. And I think the opportunity I see here is that now we can expand easily to just not our campus, but anywhere. Our resources are now available. If we can connect to anywhere, anybody at any time very easily because of thanks to Google Meet or whatever we call it. So there is the opportunity that we can whatever our resource can be made available to a much wider audience. The challenge is the other side has to be motivated, interested, and how do we do that? Is the real challenge because we don't have eye-to-eye contact anymore. And there, I think we have to change a bit of our teaching style and content. And one point that has come up over many years, and it's nothing new, is to kind of give students something that they are interested in learning, and that relates to the course. That is the key thing to find out. I teach thermodynamics, and it's actually it's followed by this is a basic course, which is very difficult to make applied and practical. But the course that follows this thermodynamics course is aircraft engines, which is very complex, very real life, very exciting to students. So I bring in context of components of that into my course, and I see that the response, students have always liked it, and their motivation level increases if they see something that they can learn in a practical scenario. And it's each one of us have to make that decision. What is going to motivate them more than the mental lab teaching? And we face it in classes also. There are backbenchers who are not paying attention. Now we have more backbenchers. To get their attention is harder. So, but if the onus goes to the students, that you have to somehow put some work, find a nice problem for yourself, it works. It actually, even if in a very secondary level, basic fundamental course, it actually worked. In more applied course, it's easier to do. With more mature audience, third, fourth year students or MTech students, it's much easier to do. That the onus goes on to them that they have to do something. You say, these are the things you can try. These are the options, but you have to put in the work to find your project problem. Sometimes it works better. They have to come back and discuss with us, and maybe closer to the evaluation, they will do it. They will not do it as systematically as we expect them to. But if you have at least some milestones in the semester, they tend to respond much better. They take the onus of that. They have to learn. They have to score their marks. It's not a regular exam where they can get by learning only the day before. And these are probably more practical way of more real life situations where this is the way they will face outside of classroom as well. So I think our teaching probably now have to become more connected to real life situation. They in a real life situation, in a job in somewhere, they have to solve a problem. They have all the Google, all the internet, all the people they can talk to and resources available, but they still have to solve the problem. So we are getting closer to that. We can't control what resources the person has, even with all 3D monitoring and 4D monitoring in the digital way. We just cannot control. So we have to come up with things that is more real life, and they're probably somewhat open-ended, and they have to come up and say, this is what I've learned. You have to find ways to judge how much they've learned, how much of the basics they've learned and applied to this problem, even if they've not found the answer to the problem. So maybe many things I said are a little bit hypothetical, they sound hypothetical, but I think some of these things worked in the core course I taught. Elective courses were easier to handle, so I'm not going into them too much more. But I think some of these things will be important, whether it is hybrid, digital, or whichever mode. We all missed Blackboard teaching, but I think Blackboard teaching, I don't see come back in the same way as we have been doing earlier. We have lost part of it, unfortunately, I think, at least for the next couple of years. But I think still there's a lot of hope and a lot of opportunities. I think we should think about in that sense, I would say. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sinha. I think you have highlighted some important aspects once again. for the benefit of all our speakers as well as the audience. So an important point, of course, is that there is a saying in Bengali that you really cannot clap with one hand. You need two hands. So it's like that, the two stakeholders are the teachers and the students. So I think we need to be more sensitive too about the challenges facing the students. We do care about such challenges and the difficulties that students have been facing for the last 2 years, being at home and yet having to really sort of take on all the academic load and execute them to a reasonable degree of satisfaction. So that's an important challenge. So maybe once they come back to the campus, that part would be taken care of. But since the hybrid will still retain the digital component, so the engagement with the students and overcoming their passivity will remain a big task for the teachers as well, it seems to me. And of course, the perennial problem of evaluation, which needs to be both fair and rigorous. So that I think most of us have now actually realized the challenges it faces, but necessity is the mother of invention. So therefore, I think the point that you highlighted, that your audit of a traditional mode of exam, the amount of time and the resources that it consumed, vis-a-vis a more direct project-based evaluation, if it takes the same time, maybe the latter one is a better one, or somehow to come with a mixed kind of situation in which both can be tried. So thank you once again for all your views. To surmise, I think the common thread was the perspective from all speakers was the perspectives of the student participation. So it's a two-way process. Any teaching is a two-way process. So the digital mode seems to have probably underemphasized the kind of participatory aspect of the students. And that is for genuine reasons, because of the distance and because of the difficulty of engaging everybody at the same time as it would be possible in a classroom. But as we move into a hybrid kind of a zone, perhaps this aspect needs to be looked at by teachers. So another important aspect is that although we are building up a large repository, how to actually keep it live, how to keep it interesting, how to change it, how to tweak it from year to year and still make it kind of expansive as it go, as the time rolls on. That becomes an important point. So it was also a bit of I would say a tongue-in-cheek comment from my side. The point that was mentioned by Professor Singh, that two unexpected or not so very agreeable things have happened over the last 2 years. The over-dependency on Google and the advent of COVID. So I dare say that Larry Page and Sergey Brin probably would be livid from hearing that you have put COVID and the Google at the same basket. But they have surely been a challenge. The fact of the matter is that people turn to Google the moment they have a question. But it is also true that the information there is often unstructured. So it may not be an appropriate kind of substitute for what a teacher can possibly offer. And of course, the cooperativity that is necessary between the teachers and the students, that also has to be understood. I think we have been thinking along these lines also. I've been talking to Professor Patwardhan, and in PPC CLT, I think there is some initiative to get students on board, to get a view of the difficulties or the things that they liked about in the last 2 years, and so that make it available to the faculty as a feedback from the students, so that faculty also has an opportunity to understand and probably make use of it. So with that, I think it has been an interesting discussion as expected. I'll open the floor to questions from the audience. Please address the specific panelist if you wish to do so, and I would request the panelists to respond after that. Thank you.
Hello, this is Professor Pant speaking from the Aerospace Department.
Yes.
I have a question to my colleague Krishnendu, who mentioned that we should bring in a lot of, I'll just switch my video on. We should bring in a lot of practical knowledge and real life in the classroom. That is a very hugely commendable aspect. And I really think That is the difference between a normal classroom teaching using textbooks and materials and the one taught by an expert. But Krishnendu, my point is that sometimes in the class you have a large, difference between the various audience members, wherein there could be some people who are experienced, maybe even industry professionals, as we have in our master's courses, and we have novices and extremely young people. So how do you balance a situation like this when you have a difference in the experience and exposure level of the audience in your class?
Yeah, thanks, Professor Pant. I think it's a very good point. There are two aspects to it. One is when you're teaching a core course, its variation is to somewhat less. But when you're teaching a more like I meant core course at the undergraduate level. But if you're teaching at the MTech level, you're absolutely right. It is true that there will be varying. In fact, I feel that we can exploit that difference to our advantage. We have people coming from the defense who know or probably fly aircrafts that we talk about in our class. There are people who come from other places as sponsored candidates who have a lot of knowledge about the field. So one way to do it is that bring this component of flexibility in the mode, in the sense that when I say you do a project, I say you have some flexibility in choosing a project. Person who has experience will naturally go towards a project which is related to what he does before. Otherwise, meaning, he's a sponsored candidate from the Defense Air Force, he would probably go to a thing that's relevant to him. And then of something of that sort. And there will be other students who don't have much exposure. For them, we have some standard problems, which are not entirely textbook, but somewhat like a textbook, which have well-defined answers. So there are cases where students are not able to pick a problem on their own because they don't have the experience. So there's a small repository of projects which have been done previously or what we think are well-defined problems. We offer them, and many of them take that also. Yeah, so this is a mix and match depending on their expertise. And I think the most important thing is the flexibility, which I think we have got, which was not there earlier in a classroom mode of teaching. Now we have gotten used to a bit more being flexible. COVID has made all of us flexible on every front, I think. And teaching is no different. And I think I myself, I can say that a lot more flexibility has come in my teaching, and I'm more open to they're choosing certain aspects of their what they want to do, and I think it has paid off well. I think that is one lesson I have learned, and I think I seem to feel like I should continue that in whatever mode I would in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sina, for the clarification. Small anecdote here. I think it's a very commendable suggestion, and many of us think along these lines to actually bring in a real world flavor. But I must admit that it's quite a challenge for the faculty themselves, because I have a friend who is a non-academic but vastly experienced in the industry and who has done himself very well. Every time we meet, he exclaims by saying that, okay, here comes the Brahmin, which he means that I am the Brahmin. So this is what he means, that an academic is typically a person who's far removed from what happens in the real world. And therefore, for an academic to really to be appreciative of the complexities of real world and their working, it will be a great challenge. But it's a great learning for academics as well. I feel that consulting mode is a good pathway to actually gain access to this kind of problems and industry-defined problems. But many of us actually are fairly active on the consulting front, so I'm sure we would be able to bring such information knowledge into the class. So what it means is expanding the boundary of traditional teaching, going from simply learning what is there in the book, but much beyond it. What is unseen, what is not taught, has to be taught now, and also the students would have to teach themselves about it. Okay, so that's my 2 pies of comments. So if any other panelists would like to respond to this aspect, I would welcome that. Professor Madhu, would you like to respond?
If I may add one small comment here.
Professor Roy.
Just one moment, Professor Vinjapur. Yes, please. Professor Sina.
Yeah, so I think, Professor Roy, as you rightly pointed out, the challenge is how do we blend classroom material real life problem, and that is where really the experience of the instructor, that he can still make sure that the basics are learned and applied in a real world setting. And obviously, our what I call as real world is definitely far removed from real world. But at least the student gets a flavor of how we can take this to that. That's exactly what we all have been trying, I think, in different ways, and it has different levels of success. Yeah, please, Professor Madhu, please go ahead.
So this is a very important point, and as Professor Roy also mentioned, it is not easy to get these type of problems into the classroom. It is challenging, but it is well known, documented in education research that students learn best when they know why they are learning something. So if it's a big class, when you said that you're doing project-based courses, Professor Sinha, I teach a class of 120 students. Now, it is very difficult for me to give projects and evaluate. Now, of course, you have suggested ways of doing this, but even then, it might become difficult for me to just find so many projects unless students are doing by themselves. But having said that, what is important for teachers is to indicate the utility or where the concepts that they are learning, where they are used, why they are used, how they are used. I think if these are articulated well in lectures, that will also definitely help boost learning, and it will increase motivation towards learning, rather than just coming and saying that these are the principles. If you start with the applications and then tell how to go about doing things with the fundamentals that they learn, it will definitely boost learning.
Yeah, thank you. Professor Prakash, would you like to essay some of your comments on this?
I think Professor Madhu has already commented very similar things. So at this point, I don't have any other additional comments on that.
Yeah, Professor Singh, would you like to respond?
I think most of the things are already said. In a way, I mean, all of us who are coming from research and who have seen the real world, in some way we bring that in class, and if we can bring that more and more, perhaps it would be more and more interesting. Always that excites students.
Yeah, sure. It remains a big challenge, but I think if it is imbibed and implemented, it would surely improve and augment the content itself also. So I presume there was a question from the audience. I missed it. If there is somebody who still wants to ask a question, please do so. Yes, please. Professor Asholekar, please go ahead.
Yeah. Very nice to hear the colleagues share their experience. I have myself spent past 17 months with a great anxiety and anticipation because there was suddenly the change of mode from face-to-face to online. And I'm hearing that many other colleagues have comparable, analogous, similar kind of experiences. I always felt that I was probably very highly anxious and highly unsure about my effectiveness in the class. And that feeling continues as we go online, and it will continue, I'm sure, even if we go hybrid. Not to say that in face-to-face I was super, I was excellent. I'm not sounding that, I hope. But really, I have not understood one thing, and the point is still unsettled in my mind, that which method is more effective in getting the students excited about learning. And I am making reference to several comments people made with and regarding Professor Krishnendu's comments. And really, is there any other way of getting students excited in classroom or in face-to or in online teaching without bringing the real world experience in teaching? I do not know any. Past 29 years, I have not discovered any other method of getting students excited. I cannot write first law of thermodynamics and teach them thermodynamics, or I cannot teach Brownian motion and teach them what is Brownian motion and then get them interested in diffusion. I cannot imagine that. So So how is online teaching versus face-to-face going to make job difficult or easy for a teacher? For a student, I can appreciate and I respect there are challenges on the side of students, but I am not seeing how a repository of recorded lectures. I have also myself, been very idealistic and done a lot of recording and NPTEL courses and all. But I am not still very clear after 17 years of testing by fire that happened to all of us. I'm not really sure how face-to-face can make us better teacher or better communicator vis-a-vis the online teaching if we do not change the way we approach the subject. So I'm not talking about art of teaching or art of talking. I'm talking about structure of pedagogy, structure of teaching. I personally have felt now after 17 months of experience that face-to-face will make a better thing to me than online. I am now disillusioned about face-to-face. I think challenge remains same for me.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Solekar. I think most of us are probably in the same boat. You have articulated it well for all of us. This remains a problem. But without diminishing the import of your question, I think most of us will agree that what things were about 20 years ago was very different from what the situation is now in terms of teaching students, because there are a lot of externalities over which we have no control. And therefore, that is also an important aspect which keeps chasing us, and we keep chasing it in order to at least convince ourselves that we are still useful. So it's a big challenge, and there is no doubt that maybe the teaching would have to change in order to keep the students engaged. And I personally believe that what a student learns himself or herself is something that stays with the person. So there has to be a lot of initiative. There has to be a lot of engagement from the student side as well. Okay. So I think we will go back to our panelists, and probably if any of the panelists would like to chip in and answer the question or show some direction, it's most welcome. So we can start with Professor Dulla.
Thank you, Professor Rai. I think there is one point which actually most of us have actually missed. It just occurred to me towards the end of the first round of discussions. I think collaboration among the students. I've been teaching during COVID the second year undergrads. So, and the current batch which I'm teaching has never come to campus. So, and it means they still have the JEE advanced exam mode. So what I have learned is they don't discuss with their friends or classmates. Okay, they don't do any collaboration. In fact, there are some assignments which I give specifically telling that I strongly encourage you to collaborate, but I actually see that they just don't discuss with each other. That is something missing. When they actually come to campus, hopefully they will start talking to their classmates and actually solve problems together. Because I always tell them that don't be selfish in actually learning for yourself, because when you teach, you actually learn. Okay, unless you teach, you don't learn. You may think that you understood it, but that's not necessarily true all the time. But you teach, the other person will ask you some questions, you'll actually learn in the process. And that's what I have been following when we had this offline or regular classroom mode. So regular classroom. So I used to make them teach some topics. I'm randomly asking them, okay, why don't you just explain what I just explained to the rest of your classmates? So that actually also boosts a bit of confidence. That is also missing in our online system. And I'm not sure whether in the undergraduate second year core course, I may not be able to give any projects. It's a bit too early. But I think what Professor Madhu has actually mentioned, why is actually extremely important. If you want to get their attention, the only way to do it, explain them why they have to learn that particular topic. And most of the time in all my lectures, I start my class with that, saying that, okay, today we are going to discuss this. Immediate question, I only ask that, okay, we should know why we are even learning this. Okay, so it actually kind of helps them, because otherwise it's like we're just doing it for sake of grades. So if they know why they are able to, why they are learning it, especially real life examples, day to day, it works for me in my course. I'm not saying it actually works for the rest of the faculty members. For me, it's easy to explain to them. Pick an example. I'll ask them, okay, look at the surroundings, see what equipment you have, and then I'll ask them question from it. So that kind of get some attention and interest from them. That kind of helped a lot. I'm not quite sure that kind of even addresses the question that was actually raised by Professor Asolekar, but why always helps. This I strongly believed. I think I will continue to believe. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Dulla, for your comments. Professor Asolekar's comment, I would say it's more existential in some sense. And to borrow the word from the French, existentialist, it is a question of angst, which actually most of us are facing because of the seeming quote unquote encroaching uselessness of teachers in the current dispensation. So I think it is a very challenging question because it means that we have to really reorient ourselves in order to achieve the same goals. So it is a very fundamental question. So maybe that traditional notion of teaching probably would have to change. Okay. So in fact, one of my senior colleagues, Professor Anand, who was the director of IIT Madras, he had once mentioned in an informal exchange that the traditional mode of teaching was one teacher and 50 students. And now you have 50 teachers and one student. So you have to vie for the attention of a single student because there are so many sources of learning now. So I think the traditional status of a teacher probably would have to change also to some extent so that you still become a useful contributor to the development of the student's intellect and his overall growth in the personality. So I think the question is very philosophical. I don't foresee any very simple answers, but it is important that Professor Asolekar has raised this question. So if anybody else from the panel would like to respond to it, you're welcome.
I can add a few lines.
Yes.
So I think the question is valid, as we say, whether it is whichever mode of instruction it is, physical, online, hybrid, or if whatever future brings to us, how to get students motivated. And the current pandemic situation, lockdown with online digital mode has actually made that stark question even more stark. We see more disconnect with the students. And I think here one thing we know some of it, but I think I've seen it also, that students are very smart. They know what they want. I think all of us will agree to that. And it's only thing that we have to match what we want with what they want. And if we can do that, then there's a success. And of course, the student wants a high-paying job. Of course, I cannot, teaching thermodynamics, I cannot give them a high-paying job. But so that is where we have to apply our minds and find what is really that they want. And the society outside changes, their expectation changes. And as Professor Roy said correctly, over the last 20 years, now we have students coming with different expectations. So we have to change naturally. But I think the students are much more, they know what they want. Earlier, more of teaching was more geared towards research. Now we know majority of our students don't go for higher studies, I think, and they go for more for the job market and the things. So I think that is where we have to probably put our efforts into that. How do we make our teaching more realistically appealing to them instead of just teaching? We still cannot compromise on what we teach. We cannot give up the basics because the basics are important. They have to learn some basics, but the basics can be connected to something that they really want. I mean, in fact, if you see, whenever there's a topic is hard, data science, there are huge lines to take those courses and the huge wait for students wanting to take those courses. Or at some point it was nano, or at some point it was bio, and at some point. So students know what they want. They are aware of the situation outside, and I think can we do something to probably change our teaching in a way we can connect better to that aspiration, if not entirely, but at least partially. And that is where I think comes that telling the question why we are doing it. Can we relate that why question to what they want? So I think the question has always been there. It's just that we are faced with it more now because of a different mode of teaching, and we are facing more challenges, I think, because of that.
Thank you, Professor Singh. I think it's important that we all realize that there is a waning interest among students, and in terms of appreciating, the academic tools, techniques, and fundamentals remain the hallmark of any education. Whether you go to industry X or Y, ultimately this will stand you in good state. So this is something that probably needs to be conveyed with gusto, and so that the students are also convinced. It's a tightrope walk, no doubt, balancing the practical with the ideal and the fundamentals with the applied. But probably it has to be done. It means we would have to extend ourselves a little more than when, hitherto. Okay, so if there is any other comment from any other panelist or from the audience, that's most welcome.
Maybe I can add
Yes,
thing in this.
Prakash.
The comment by Professor Asolekar is really very important, and it was always there. And perhaps maybe in recent reference, maybe this was started when the textbook appeared. And then when this was a question that what is there in the class when everything is there in the textbook and teacher is teaching from the textbook. So always we have to add some value into our teaching that they somehow won't find other places. In some way, the way of presentation, the way of knowledge, the way of thinking about the problem. So something extra we have to embed in our teaching so that that will remain, say, a point of interest.
Yeah, thank you. So any other comments from the audience is also invited.
Professor, may I address the question?
Yes, please.
This is Prakash, Professor Asolekar. If I understand the question, your question is online teaching and classroom teaching, which seems more better for delivery of course? Is that question? Okay. So
the underlying thesis is that either way, the challenge remains same. So method of teaching online or face-to-face has nothing to do with the way how we teach. The pedagogy are outside of that. So if you change the mode tomorrow, nothing dramatic is going to happen. So let us argue that I am a bad teacher and I do not teach well. Just because you change the method is not going to make me a good teacher.
okay.
First of all, I think Sham, having received the award, you should not declare such things in the public forum. Please go ahead.
So actually, yeah. So this is basically, I do agree that these are different methods of teaching, offline, online, and sometimes even without a teacher, the learning can happen automatically also. Like you put some system that the student comes and then there's a virtual university which may possibly come in the future. No teacher required. Everything people are talking about AI. Everything is possible. So in the future, there will not be even a teacher to teach also. But what I understand is just to address this question, I agree that these are different modes. So teaching always closer to the heart of the students and the faculty member, which makes a kind of difference rather than automated system. So generally what I do is basically I start from node to node. So anyway, all the faculty members are senior to me. In fact, Professor Asolekar has an experience of my age. So I don't need to teach him how to teach. But what I do is generally I take up from a different domain of known to unknown. Say, for example, I teach a lot of concrete. So cement concrete, I take a lot of analogy from food industry and pharmaceutical industry. So what happens is from the monotonous way of construction materials, they look at a different domain, which is known, and then bring back the analogy and put it together into the system of concrete. So which makes them really understand. For example, I can give a simple example. When I talk about the corrosion, so I talk about the pH, then I take our carbonated drinks, why they are having a low pH. And by that means I can also say that this is not really good for your health as well. So how the steel gets corroded, how this, the body also gets, affected because of pH. So these kinds of things makes them more creating interest, because what I feel is it's about interest. So once interest is there, irrespective of the system, the mode of teaching will, even if it is differing, the student learning will be there. So that's my response. So yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments from the panelists? Yes, please go ahead.
A quick comment. I think you raised a point. A bad teacher may remain a bad teacher in whichever mode. But if one wants to become a good teacher, it is possible. So good teachers can be made. Maybe great teachers cannot be made. Richard Feynman is a great teacher, probably comes to my mind straight away. So if you look at his lectures, these these are probably, there are some innate qualities. But good teachers can be made. This is what I learned. Now, actually, I have read a lot of, I was actually surprised to see there was so much literature on teaching. And it takes time. It takes, of course, I don't know if all of us have so much time, but there are good methods of teaching. And believe it or not, actually, I applied some of them. And it not only, in my opinion, enhanced the learning of students, but it also made teaching interesting for me. So to answer your question, yes, it can be made now, whether online or offline. I think
So
it's actually
it
also both
happens.
ways. But I'm not sure about the online. The methods of teaching that at least that I read are mostly for offline teaching. Of course, there are many articles on teaching online also, especially in those countries where systems are flexible and the working people can also attend classes. So there are several asynchronous learning methods and so on and so forth. But yes, good teachers can be made.
Yeah, certainly. I think I would agree with you. And the fact that you have been digging into the literature, it shows, because they have given you the award, and you certainly have made it that way. I think it's actually very I would be appropriate that the discussion is veered into what is the fundamental nature of pedagogy itself. So I feel that the points that you have raised, Professor Aswalekar, are very valid. But I think these questions have come up because of the changed context in our times. Because it is no longer the same as it was 20, 25 years ago, where the teacher and the student relationship was different. The externalities were different. The expectations were somewhat, less or more buffered from what was happening in the outside world. So academia was more in a purist mode. Okay, now it's probably much more difficult to do that because the external world has made heavy inroads into academia through the student changed consciousness, their expectations, and so it's a bigger challenge for teachers. But I think it's still interesting because it is something which is subject to a lot of reflections. The answers are not easy. I must agree with you. Piecemeal answers or instantaneous answers are not the ones that will probably give us the solution. But one thing, it seems to me that there has to be cooperativity. So it cannot be a one-way kind of a teaching as it used to be when we were growing up as students, that we simply heard whatever teacher said, went back to the hostel and learned and gave the exams. But a more active engagement from the student, I think it would benefit teaching as a whole because the onus will be more on the students also. So that is a simple way to actually keep them engaged. But of course, it needs two ways, engagement. So the teachers also will probably have to change to some extent. So that is what one of the fundamental underlying questions that I think Professor Patwardhan had also highlighted and what I had actually conveyed to him is that to indicate to the panelists that how will it change the way we teach? How will it add to the evolution of teachers itself? This new mode of teaching or whatever way you think, it could be blended, it could be anything. But the point is that there is probably a need for the teachers also to evolve to some extent. Yeah. So any other comments from the audience?
Professor Rai, Balaji here. May
Yes.
share a couple of thoughts. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that I will not go to opt for hybrid mode. I will be completely doing face-to-face once that is allowed. Because for teaching, I'm not able to see how I can, I'm not looking at the evaluation part and other things, only the teaching part. I'm not sure how I can combine the recording because I think logistically it is a nightmare in our classroom. Even to have a microphone which is connected and working continuously is something that I have had difficulties. But more importantly, what I see is that I walk around, I use slides, I also write, and often I make students to speak out and make them come to board and do something. And when they say something or try to do something on board, I realize that I have inadvertently conveyed something differently or wrongly. So that helps me. So I'm, and also it helps many students. I know many of the students in my class are not from English medium background or they're not very articulate. and making them to speak, sort of being very, showing compassion and other things helps them to sort of come out of their shell and sort of speak. I think that is an important point that is being missed in this online mode. And if it is face-to-face, there are many other advantages, and I am very sure that I will be only doing face-to-face, no hybrid, as far as teaching is concerned. Thank you, sir.
So one final question from my side, if there is none from other speakers. Is one
Sandeep,
aspect.
can I speak?
Yes, please,
Sandeep?
go ahead. Yes,
Jay
go
Naik
ahead.
here.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm addressing a question raised by Sham Solekar, and which is whether the online teaching mode or the offline teaching mode, which of them is good? Now, as far as this question from the perspective of a teacher is concerned, we cannot answer now, but at least from the perspective of the students, can we not compare the kind of rating for the same course, for the same teacher, for offline and online, and the averages for the institute or the department are available? That would be an extremely useful input to understand how students are perceiving the difference between online and offline. I have spoken this to Madhu Vinjamur, I have spoken this to Sachin Patwardhan, I have written to Preeta, but I think that this needs to be taken up by the institute at institute level, because it's an important question. We should actually quantitatively find out from the students' feedback what is the difference for other parameters being the same they have perceived these courses. That is one. Second thing is about the making courses interesting. I personally find the traditional paradigm that go from the concrete to abstract, from known to unknown, and then relating the abstract to the reality of the actual practical practice of engineering always really gets students interested. And in that process, I usually find that if there is a certain element of magic in the course content and the way you deliver it, magic attracts everybody. Simple things, when you raise the questions, if we are able to really show the students that some things that they felt they did not know actually was something that they already knew, and with the help of their prior understanding of the subject, they can tackle a very complex subject which they earlier felt was not possible at all. The second way to do it is to show them that when they think that they have understood a particular subject, when you go into the nuances, that they suddenly realize, yes, we did not really understood the particular internal contradiction or the way this topic had evolved, and therefore some questions which remained unanswered. So in that sense, developing, clubbing the history of development of a particular topic rather than showing them the final version of the topic as is presented in the textbook really helps. So for example, when I teach thermodynamics, I make use of Lewis and Gilbert's book, which narrates the story, the way thermodynamics developed by trial and error, instead of really teaching thermodynamics in an axiometric manner. And it is important that the teaching is not a one-way process, but really it's a process of constructing new knowledge. So all science is a hypothetical deductive construction of new knowledge. And if that experience can be imparted in the courses and teaching, I used to find, at least in offline courses, it used to get students interested. So I don't know how others' experience is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Naik. Yeah, I think your comments are insightful, and most of us will probably agree to it. I have a small comment in this respect, that there is also a problem which I see in the current dispensation, is that the growing fineness and complexity of theory
And it's seeming disjunction from real world practice because of the availability of high power tools, techniques, and theory itself has become very finely differentiated, and it has expanded in a very dramatic manner. So it is impossible to really integrate all that in an undergraduate education and to still actually link up the theory with the practice so easily. And because I think the most common, I think, experience of students are that what is being taught in the class is very otherworldly. It has no relation what is happening in the current world. And with the growth of many different platforms, the availability of entrepreneurial opportunities, etc., their vision of the world is very different from ours. And I think they look at a world as something which can be struggled with, something that can be changed, something that you can probably discover on your own. You don't need, many props from teachers, because teachers are teaching something else, and what is happening in the real world is something else. Because they are probably far more attuned with the real world than we are. Because given our obsession with fundamentals, theory, which is very important, but at the same time, the new generation of students, their availability of information, availability of, and understanding them without the intervention of teachers, that has also become a very important aspect. So this is so the challenges remain. So the usefulness of teachers still needs to be rethought, I think, and recalibrated. So which means that we also have to, as I said, the old American saying, teach old dogs the new tricks. So, I consider myself one of that category. So yeah, there's much to learn and remain relevant. But, we have to be careful of the word relevance. Definition of relevance changes from from the students to the teachers. But so that actually goes into the question of value. What is valuable ultimately? So that also needs to be discussed. So therefore, it is not simply the practice only, it is the value which enlivens everything, and which, if at all, it would be preserved in academia. It is probably much more easy to preserve those things in academia because we are probably buffered from many challenges and many distractions. And so therefore, if the academia doesn't give it, I don't think anybody else will probably be able to share that so easily. Thank you. So any other comments from the panelists? I'm sure
points raised by Professor Nayak is around very valuable. He came and told me about this. Evaluations before COVID and after COVID, what is the effect of online teaching? Yeah, I would say, even though I wanted to do it, Professor Nayak, I think I have also become like a student. I have to give you some excuses for not doing this. But I think it should be done. It should be done just to see how things have changed. Yeah, hopefully we'll do it at least, in the near future. But he also raised, I think, some important points, which is going from concrete to abstract and then to engineering applications. I think this is a very good way of doing, and in fact, that is one of the ways that have been suggested as a good method of teaching. For example, if you are teaching something, you would first, instead of going to the principals directly, one would give data, for example, and then ask students to explain the data, or say that what you know you may not be able to explain, and then tell them what they need to explain this data. And so therefore, the question of why they are learning what they are learning comes up, and that could motivate the students to learn better. Yeah, thank you.